Honorable guests and attendees, Honorable President and host of the summit. Greetings from an open-skied Athens here in Greece. The coronavirus situation is still escalating in most parts of the US and the world. Just in one quarter, it has crippled most of our economies, clearly indicating one thing: we were not prepared. Medical and genetic research carried out in combined human and animal tissue for the purpose of developing novel RNA-based vaccine technology has also borne such asymmetric risks like Ebola or the late COVID-19. Once escaping our lab environments, subviruses can no longer be controlled either by the known methods of treatment or the available health system infrastructures at national levels. The Gov initiative in Geneva, in tandem with the ID2020 project, which are both endorsed by World Health Organization and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, have set out a clear path for our future regarding global health and vaccination programs as a means to reduce the high mortality figures of the youngest, but also to shield humanity from the rising pandemics of the future. One of the main aims of the ID2020 project specifically has already identified the most appropriate and valid technology for delivery of derma patches. This will allow 1 billion people worldwide to acquire, for the first time ever, some form of an ID that will also open up their social welfare inclusion. The above two initiatives clearly share common ground and strategy. They pose, however, delivery and deployment challenges as well. The ID2020 project, which was meant to go live before the end of the year, has met criticism on the grounds of possible privacy breaches under the HIPAA or GDPR legislation. The COVID-19 pandemic also changed every stakeholder's priority in that the availability of a working and tested vaccine has become an imperative before the winter season in case the pandemic hits a second, harder breakout. This on its own is a huge time stress for clinical trials to be completed, authorities' approval to be released, and production capacity and timely administration of vaccination to be carried out. At this venture point in time, it seems that we'll have to make an irreversible decision as to how to prioritize these global scale projects. We can either run ID2020 and vaccine production as autonomous projects running with confined case numbers for test purposes and safer decision outcomes, or we can focus our entire capacities in identifying the most probable working model for a vaccine that will take care of COVID-19 further spreading out. We all realize that by delivering a partly tested vaccine with COVID-19 strands to the entire population for the first time, we undertake the risk of future known and unknown disease outbreaks, which are hard to identify at this point in time. The ID2020 initiative, on the other hand, is close to identifying the most appropriate and efficient technology that will allow for the build-up of medical information per person accessible via near-field communication networks. If we safeguard the person's anonymity, which takes care of most privacy concerns, we will be able to create a pool of medical big data for the tracking of vaccine performance and other medication efficacy or probability of disease outbreaks in the future. The data structure of the blockchain medical information might also allow for open metadata accessible to all stakeholders, including pharma, university researchers, or even civil servants and families. The ID2020 could be beta tested within year 2020 to a large part of the overall 1 billion people lacking formal IDs. They will also provide a sound ground for further implementation or extensions of the ID2020 program across scientific fields. This decision exercise seems more of a multi-spanning game theory problem than a medical community-only agenda. There seems to be more of a benefit to risk evaluation formula to apply with adequate safety. Besides the indemnity that pharma producers of vaccines have initially secured, the financial impact of going too early to the global market are far more intricate than competitive maneuvers in grey areas. The community may decide to go either way of the decision spectrum based on new evidence arising, but also the emerging risk profile of COVID-19 pandemic and the political and financial ability of countries to sustain more cases before a safe vaccine mechanism has been developed for final delivery. The ID2020 program, with all its endorsement capacity, will have to support the medical community, and not only, in making informed decisions in the near future on what works and what doesn't, early enough to adapt and adopt. At each step of this decision-making process, we will have to determine beyond any bias what options have benefits that outweigh the risks with an adequate degree of certainty. This has to be a win-win formula. We simply cannot afford to fail. Thank you for your time and attention. This was Georgios Raikos, Strategy Advisor from Athens, Greece.